Right, I will start this class. And get going because looks like there aren't going to be too many people to turn up. So here I go. This is about ecologism. Ecologism believes that the non-human world is worthy of ethical consideration, and that this should be taken into account um, account in rather by the taken into no taken by the social, economic, and political systems that have been that have that been created by human beings. One of the people who is an important figure in this whole scheme of things, is Garrett Harding. Who first wrote a book called the Tragedy of the Commons, where he is referring to poor nations. By the time I finish Garrett Harding, I'll come back to this particular point, because the first, what should we say, Garrett Harding uses, in order to make his point, he uses an analogy, two analogies actually, one is the Tragedy of the Commons, but I'll deal with it after I deal with the other analogy, which is the sorry. He creates this analogy of the lifeboat ethics, in which he okay, in the lifeboat ethics, one Harding talks of a lifeboat in the middle of a sea or ocean, and he says that it has already "50 people sitting in it, and then he talks sorry, and it can take only 10 more people. It can take only 10 more people. So after this, he talks about 100 swimmers around the lifeboat and talks of the dilemma of which 10 to take from the 100 swimmers. Uh, some people say that the dilemma is about taking anyone from the swimmers, because rationally one cannot establish that some swimmers need to be on the lifeboat as there are no ethical parameters put in place to decide on this. Well, so what Garrett Harding is basically saying is that there's a lifeboat. It's a funny thing. It seems to have a capacity of 60 people. I don't know why he chose that. So this is the lifeboat, and in the lifeboat, there are 50 people sitting, and it has capacity for only 10 more people to sit in it. But there are 100 swimmers. There are 100 swimmers around the lifeboat trying to get into the lifeboat. So one interpretation is that Harding is asking the question about which 10 will you take from the 100 that are swimming. The others say that he's not talking about taking any 10. His dilemma is about taking more people on the lifeboat at all. Because though there are 100 people swimming around the lifeboat, nobody knows on what basis you will choose 10 people. So the dilemma is whether you can take on any more people apart from the 50 who are already sitting in the lifeboat. So this basically means that the lifeboat is to be seen as the rich and the swimmers around the lifeboat are the poor. But while we are talking about the rich and the poor in this particular context, it is absolutely necessary to understand that this is, what should I say? These are not individuals. Lifeboats are rich nations. And the swimmers around the life boats are the poor nations. Now, what needs to be understood is that this is an approach to, it is perhaps in more ways than one, an idea that basically talks about who is in control of the Earth's resources. It's not asking a question, it's giving you the answer. It's giving you the answer by telling you that it's the poor nations that are left out in the water to swim, while the rich lifeboat is full of the rich people who don't need to swim. They are sitting in a boat comfortably. Well, it makes a point, but the analogy in itself is not a particularly great analogy. And while it, like I said, while it makes a particular point, it's an extremely inelegant way of making a point. Oh, geez, what has happened here? Yeah, sorry about that. So what we are therefore looking at is this rather poor analogy, which tries to make a point. You can make this particular point without using that analogy at all. There are a lot of people who talk today about the resources of the earth, people who talk about anthropocentrism and argue that especially those who come from animal rights, um, and other kinds of environmentalists who basically will say that human beings have somehow appropriated the earth and its resources to themselves without any respect for other living beings, be they flora or fauna. And those points are far more forceful than this. Now, though this has been sold as a theory of ecology, if you look at the limitations of this lifeboat, you see this is again very anthropocentric. So anthropo meaning anthrop is a human being. So it is human being centric. Okay. Now, if one looks at the definition of ecologism, it is about a belief that the non-human world is worthy of ethical considerations, okay, which have to be taken into account by social, economic, and political systems that are the creation of people or human beings. So the non-human part is missing here. It's missing here completely. A slightly better analogy than the lifeboat analogy is made by Garrett Harding himself. And this is the one that he made in The Tragedy of the Commons, which came out earlier than Lifeboat Ethics. What Harding says in his other analogy is, which is of a spaceship Earth. That's what he calls it. The spaceship Earth. In this, he basically says he talks about how a spaceship is controlled by a captain, somebody who's adept at controlling the spaceship. Not everybody. For example, if we talk about aircraft, not everybody can. They may be, if you take an Airbus A380, and if you put it into economy, sorry, economy class, and you can get about 800 people to sit in the Airbus A380. But it is, out of these 800 people, not everybody or anybody is capable of handling it. What it requires is pilots. And in the pilots, there are captains and there are the co-pilots. So the captain is responsible for the aircraft. So similar thing is what we are talking about here uh, in the context of a spaceship. Okay, it is controlled by a captain. But he's talking about this as a spaceship Earth. So let's deal with the Earth part. So he says, while the spaceship is controlled by a captain or a leader or whoever you want, whatever you want to call him, a person who's in control of the spaceship, the thing that we have to look at is that the Earth does not have one leader, unlike the spaceship. Doesn't have one leader leading the whole, though that has been the aspirations of many people, especially those who were totalitarian dictators. They would have liked to rule the whole earth themselves. Now, the lack of one leader to control resources and their distribution yeah, the lack of one leader to control resources and their distribution. What happens is that there is a tragedy. This is not my word. This is Harding. There is a tragedy of the commons or the poor, poor nations, since the rich nations with more power will usurp the Earth's resources, or if you like, you can call them natural resources. Oh, So what this basically means is that we are looking at the spaceship. I don't know why he called it the spaceship Earth. If the idea was to establish that what is applicable to the spaceship is somehow not applicable to the Earth and its resources, I would have thought you should talk about it as the spaceship and the Earth. That would have been a better analogy. But yet again, I raise the question that I raised when I talked about lifeboat ethics. Where is the necessity to talk about spaceships? They're having leaders. You can just come straight to the point, and you can, since this is about the distribution of resources, you can come straight to the point and say the Earth's resources are usurped by uh, the rich countries of the world, while the poor countries of the world do not have access to those natural resources. So what this basically displays is the fact that uh, the rich control the resources. There's nothing new there. Absolutely nothing new. It's been said for centuries, not decades. For centuries, this point has been made, right from the time that you had the diggers, the ranters, and the levelers in the times of evolution of private property. From then on, this has all been about the control of resources. So, unfortunately, I think these people, with due respect to their concern, it's a definite concern, and especially considering the fact that we are talking about the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, which saw uh, not so much plundering of the earth's resources as we do today. So what we need to acknowledge is the fact that these people are perhaps a little sensitive. They are sensitive even at a time when this tragedy that Harding talks about uh, is not so apparent as it is today. So to that extent, I think it is perfectly all right. But I still believe that, you know, in a in a in times where somehow publication of ideas, uh, even if they are trite, uh, is an important thing. People write all kinds of things. And unfortunately, we have the Wikipedia, which puts all these people up there. Life without Wikipedia would possibly have meant that very few people would have heard of Garrett Harding. Even in the days when I was a student, we never heard of this, and I was a student some 25 years after he wrote his Lifeboat Ethics. So even then we hadn't heard of him. So this is Wikipedia's contribution to making great people out of ordinary people. So since we are dealing with ecologism, and since I have to deal with 3 people in ecologism, I suppose we'll go to the next so-called ecologist. I really don't know why this term environmentalism was a pretty good term, a good phrase to explain. It was a pretty good phrase to explain a few things. But again, in order to publish, you have to rehash words, old words, and replace them with new ones. Ecologism is that. Otherwise, you could simply have called it environmentalism, which is respect for the environment. And I keep saying that, you know, these are all not new ideas for us in India, because we have the ancient tradition, and I'm not a right-winger. So if there are people listening to this thinking that I'm a right-winger who promotes ancient Indian culture, the sorry thing that has happened in India is the fact that we have forgotten our rich heritage, because we have also learned how to see the world only from the point of view of the West. Learning to see the world from the point of view of the West is not a bad thing. It is required, but there is no need as such to lose sight of the fact that in the rich tradition of our ancients, there has been great respect for the whole of the universe, not just the earth, the whole of the universe, which is the Brahman. And there is no idea that somehow the human being is more important than other life forms. This is not an idea that you will find in ancient India. In ancient India, the human being is as good as a chicken, is as good as a tree. And if you look at the Jains and the Buddhists, apart from the Sanatana Dharma practitioners, you will find respect for all forms of life. And Earth itself is seen as a living thing. So the cosmos of which the Earth is a part is a living entity, and we are a small component of that. So these are not new things to us. Preservation of the environment. People ate out of banana leaves, which were thrown away and are recycled because herbivores would eat those. And their dung would be used by the dung beetles. So we have disturbed the natural order, and that has happened. That has been done by the West. They first disturb the natural order, and after disturbing the natural order, they start talking about how not to disturb the natural order or how to restore parity. So that is a funny point. Actually, somebody should teach this particular idea, that those who are searching for solutions to problems are those people who basically are the creators of the problem. I think that is worthy of a discussion. Excuse me, an important call. Oh, no, it's gone. 1 second, please. आप 7:45 आइए, मेरा क्लास चल रहा हो, 7:45 खत्म हो जाता। 7:45 शुक्रिया। Sorry about the lack of professionalism. The lack of an audience, live audience, is something that makes us behave in strange ways like this, which is not following the ethics of teaching, which is once you start teaching, you don't take phone calls. My apologies to anyone who's watching this particular video for breaking those ethics. Anyway, now let's consider Aldo Leopold and his idea of land ethic. So let's try to understand what this land ethic is. Land ethic should be seen, it is a theoretical construct I am not at all pleased using this particular phrase, theoretical construct. These are not theoretical constructs. Theoretical constructs have to be something which are new, something which explain very, very large grand theory, which is exactly what Quentin Skinner uh, did when he edited a book called The Return of Grand Theory to the Human Sciences, wherein he takes into consideration those theories which explain and find solutions to large sets of problems. So that is what would be a theoretical construct, but that's okay. The world wants to call this a theoretical construct. I'm fine with it. I'll go with it. But this is not something that appeals to me terribly. It is a theoretical construct. Which argues about which not argues, which talks about how ethically human beings should regard land. That is what it talks about. It isn't anything profound. Very sorry to say. He talked about this in his work A Sand County Almanac. He talks about this in this particular work of his, a Sand County Almanac. He talks about the necessity talks about the necessity for a new ethic. I don't know what the old ethic is. Is there an ethic at all? If there is an old ethic, then that should also be explained, and what is wrong with that. I didn't find that. You just have this new ethic. But then, since we are living in the age where there's a separation of ethics and morals, ethics are simple social practices. They do not have the moral dimension to them, which is what to do and what not to do. And that is something that pervades through time and space and is transcendental. So I guess that way it can be justified, this talk about a new ethic. So in this new ethic, what does he want? A necessity for a new ethic dealing with human beings is actually human beings is relation to land and the animals and plants which need the land for their own survival and thriving. Well, in defense of Aldo Leopold, he's much older. This is somewhere in the 40s. So we are, I suppose, given that he was writing at that time and talking about other living creatures, and again, I say this is from a very Western point of view, from a very, very Western point of view, which has a different conception about life, living creatures. I must tell you something which might bore you, or you might think this is an unnecessary digression, but or it might just amuse you. I have this fear of lizards, the wall lizards, which the Americans call geckos. If there's a lizard in a room, I can't work there, I can't sleep there. So I've tried to lizard proof my house, but that's not important. What is important is that before, there was a time when there was too many lizards, even on the outside of my house. And because of my phobia of lizards, I wanted people who would kill them. And I found that I found out that it was very, very difficult to find somebody who agreed to kill the lizard or the gecko. The reason they gave is it's a living creature. It hasn't harmed you. It hasn't harmed you. It is not going to bite you. It's not going to do anything. Why do you want to kill it? Why do you want to kill it? No, we won't kill it. And I must also tell you another instance of a veterinarian who's my friend, who did not believe in euthanasia, even for animals. Usually when pets, especially dogs, when they grow old, Sometimes they have problems of immobility, which is something that is of something that causes great inconvenience to people. So they go to a veterinarian, and the veterinarian will say, all right, we'll euthanize it, because anyway, it is suffering, it's in pain or whatever. And they'll euthanize it. But this man uh, refused euthanasia. He used to tell his people that let the dog die, his clients, that let the dog die on its own, or if you can't wait for that to happen, please go to another veterinarian who will euthanize it for you. So euthanasia is not something that is used even in the case of animals, leave alone human beings. In this country, I don't think you can talk about euthanizing. That is playing God, euthanizing people or animals. And in the villages, people also don't cut trees unless it is absolutely necessary. It's only in the urban areas where we have this mad growth, uh, mad growth that is happening. You find that people are increasingly cutting down or felling trees. That is what people are doing. And that is likely to have disastrous environmental problems. One second, please. I'm having a bit of a problem with my mouse. Why is it doing this? Yeah, I guess that's a bit better. Sorry about this. So, however, like I said, Aldo Leopold was from the 1940s, and therefore you find that he can be talked about as a pioneer in the case of Western countries and Western civilization. So people in the West consider him to be the first person to create an ecology. Actually, he himself didn't use this word, so I'm also going to put, this is the word he used mostly in his writing. So he's create not an ecology, create a, no, this is, sorry. Yeah, an ecology or environment centric view of life. So, like I said, it's not such a big thing for us. It will be shortly. In another 10 years, our heritage will be forgotten. So he's called as the first person to create an ecology or environment-centric view of life. He focuses on the preservation of the health of all self-renewing ecological systems. So he's basically talking about what exactly does he mean by this whole thing about self-renewing ecological systems. Self-renewing ecological systems are both flora and fauna that are capable of reproduction. So he's arguing for the preservation, so to speak, of self-renewing life forms, meaning those which are capable of reproduction. So the argument is create an environment that is conducive to the creation of a self-renewing ecological system. So I also have to deal with Ness and his concept of deep ecology. Right now, I have run out of time, so I'll stop this here. And tomorrow, I'll do the lesson on Arne Ness. And I also have to do Ronald Dworkin. So that also I will do along with RNS. That is a bit like what you find in the Asterix comics, which is in Asterix and the Chieftain's Shield. You find this whole idea of people doing business with each other, and they are called wine and charcoal merchants. So doing Arne Ness and Ronald Dworkin is like that. It is like making something out of, putting together two things that have nothing to do with each other. But those are the necessities that I have to fulfill. So tomorrow I'll be doing Arna Nes, and some people have told me that I don't have to say Nes, it's Ness. It's just the Norwegian spelling for Ness. So it's Arne, Arna Nes, and Ronald Dworkin. So sorry for this lecture, which I'm not very used to talking to myself, which is what I'm doing. And there's been a great deal of unprofessionalism in it, like taking phone calls, for which I apologize profusely. I wouldn't have done that perhaps if it was a proper class kind of a thing. But with no audience, it's like this. If nobody is watching us, we do funny things, which we wouldn't do if other people were watching us. So I know that this is being recorded, but not having a live audience basically made me do those things. So my profuse apologies for all those things. So thank you. We'll close this today. As you can see that in itself, even this philosophy is, and there's not a philosophy, sorry, this idea is also nothing profound, nothing new, at least to us. I think it is not new to anyone, except for the uneducated. And by that, I mean, there are a lot of people who have degrees but are uneducated. And the younger generation whose life is all contained in this device, just this device. For years, I resisted this device, but I suddenly found that you cannot do anything without this device. Because you want to do banking, you need this device, you get a password, you get a... So while we are talking about all these things, we are actually living a life which is environmental unfriendly. So on that note, see you again. Bye for now.